Have you ever paused and asked yourself, what would change in my world if I truly lived as though I had already won millions, not just in fantasy, but in the deep inner conviction that the wealth was already mine? You see, when you understand that imagination creates reality, you will no longer wait for external confirmation to feel wealthy. You will begin by assuming it. We are not here to chase riches. We are here to express a state of consciousness. The law of assumption tells us that we don't become wealthy by striving. We become wealth by assuming the consciousness of already having it. This is the key. This is the secret. Live in the end, feel it real, and the world, obedient to your inner script, will play its role. I remember once, not long ago, when I was nearly penniless, I sat in a small room with only $1 in my pocket. But in my imagination, I had already inherited a fortune. I felt the weight of that wealth. I saw the numbers in my bank account, not as a wish, but as a memory. I walked through the streets of New York with the posture of a man who had just won millions. I did not beg for signs. I lived from the end. And as surely as night follows day, that imagined state crystallized into fact. When you adopt the state of already being wealthy, you step into a vibrational atmosphere that precedes the physical evidence. You are no longer waiting for riches to validate your worth. You are affirming your worth by assuming the riches. This is not vanity nor deception. It is law. You do not become rich by chasing money. You become rich by assuming the identity of one who already possesses it. But nothing comes from the outside. All is within. And it is within that your fortune must first be felt before it can be seen. To imagine is not to fantasize. It is to deliberately claim a state of being, and from that state generate all activity, all reactions, all emotions, as if what you have assumed were fact. The outer world is but a delayed reflection of your internal assumptions. That which you accept inwardly, the world will echo. And so when you move through life not as one hoping for change, but as one already changed, you awaken the hidden mechanics of manifestation. When I was younger, I found myself walking through streets lined with luxury, buildings of gold-trimmed entrances, men in fine suits, women radiant in elegance. And there I was, in a modest coat, with only a few coins in my pocket. But something stirred within me. I knew that the secret was not in the possession of wealth, but in the feeling of it. I did not need to own the mansion to walk like I did. I did not need the bank statement to feel the security of overflow. So I chose, right there, to live from the state of already having millions. I stood on that sidewalk and imagined I had just received a fortune. I felt the warm rush of security, the lightness in my chest, the casual confidence that money brings when it is no longer a worry. I walked with ease. I smiled as though I had just signed a deal. I felt no need to prove anything to anyone, and in that state I knew I was rich, not in some future fantasy, but now. I carried that state with me. When I ate as a wealthy man. When I spoke from that ease. When I paid for something, no matter how small, I did it from a consciousness of plenty. Many misunderstand this practice and assume it is mere pretending. But pretending is rooted in doubt. Assumption is rooted in knowing. When you assume something, you take it to be real, and you live from it with quiet faith. You do not explain it away. You do not argue with the senses. You abide in the conviction that what is unseen is more real than what is seen. And from this invisible wealth, visible riches must emerge. You may say, but I don't see the money yet. The bills are still here. The job hasn't changed. Yes, but all of that is the result of your former state, your former identity. Build the world you now perceive. If you want a new world, you must step into a new identity, and you must persist in it until the outer mirrors back what the inner has accepted. Do not wait for change. Become the change. Become the man or woman who has already won. Walk as if your financial problems have already been resolved. Speak as one who no longer needs to worry about lack. Think from the place where abundance is your normal. There is a remarkable shift that happens when one truly assumes the state of wealth. You begin to attract differently. People respond to you with more respect. Opportunities appear where none were before. You find yourself being introduced to others who seem to carry the very resources or answers you once thought were missing. This is not coincidence. This is the movement of a world reshaped by your internal command. The world, though it appears separate, is rooted in consciousness. When you change the root, the fruit must change. But let me caution you not to measure too quickly. Do not abandon the new state just because the old world lingers. The echo of your former self may still appear for a while. The job may still feel tight. The bank account may still read what it did yesterday. But these are shadows. They are not reality. Reality is what you now accept inwardly as true. And if you persist in this acceptance, reality must conform. You must feel yourself wealthy now, regardless of what appears. You must know yourself as rich. Not tomorrow, not when the salary increases, but now, because you have chosen to dwell in that truth. This is the mystery revealed to all who dare to believe without evidence. The one who waits to feel wealthy until the money appears is the servant of circumstance. But the one who feels wealthy before a single dollar changes hands is the master of life. That is the difference. That is the cause of all transformation. And that is the invitation to step into the state of already being wealthy, and from that state build the world anew. Freedom, whether financial or spiritual, is not granted by the world. It is assumed within and expressed without. The outer symbols of freedom, money, time, choice, are simply shadows cast by the inner reality. One does not attain financial freedom by collecting coins, but by entering a state of consciousness where abundance is the natural and effortless expression of being. The secret lies not in effort, but in inner vision, seeing beyond what is into what is already yours by divine right of imagination. To create wealth is not to summon something foreign to you. It is to release what is already within you. All states exist. Wealth, poverty, mediocrity, they are all states, available at any moment to the one who dares to claim them. Your work is not to manufacture money, but to select the state in which financial liberty is your living reality, and to persist there. That state will attract all the conditions, relationships, and opportunities required to bring about the fulfillment of your assumption. I once knew a man who labored daily, earning just enough to survive. He was not lazy, nor was he ungrateful, but his inner vision was imprisoned by what he saw. He believed his paycheck was the measure of his value. He prayed for breakthroughs, but imagined limitations. And as long as his inner world was confined by appearances, his outer world remained small. One evening we spoke. I said, can you imagine what it would feel like to no longer count every penny, to wake up and know you are free, not because you checked your account balance, but because you assumed a new identity? He nodded, uncertain but willing. I told him to write down the life he would live if money were no object, not as a goal, but as a memory. Each night he was to read it and feel it as already done. Weeks passed. He persisted. At first it felt unnatural, but soon his inner world began to shift. He no longer walked like a man owned by bills. He walked with dignity. He dressed with care. He started to speak from confidence, not hesitation. Then one day a former acquaintance offered him a position that doubled his income. That was only the beginning. New doors opened. He began to consult. Opportunities multiplied. But more important than the money was the transformation of his identity. He was no longer trying to be free. He was being free. This is the essence of inner vision. To see not with the eyes of the flesh, but with the eyes of spirit. To use imagination as your true sight, and from that inner sight move through the world with knowing. You must learn to disregard appearances that contradict your desire. If the bank balance says one thing, but your inner knowing declares another, believe the inner. The outer is temporary, plastic, reactive. The inner is eternal, causative, and sovereign. Financial freedom, then, is not tied to your profession, your background, or your circumstance. It is tied only to your capacity to inhabit the state of wealth in consciousness. You may look around and see reasons to fear. You may hear the news speak of recession, inflation, or scarcity, but none of that is your truth unless you accept it. What you accept as true in imagination, you enforce in reality. And when your inner world is saturated with the feeling of already being free, the outer world bends to match it. If you would be free, you must first feel free. Feel what it's like to pay with ease. Imagine yourself tipping generously, not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you are rooted in abundance. See yourself giving without anxiety, receiving without guilt, resting without dread. What would it feel like to schedule your day not around obligations, but around desires? To wake up and ask, what do I want to create today? Instead of how will I survive? That feeling, pure, unshaken, embodied, is the soil in which freedom grows. And yet, this is not about indulgence. This is not about flaunting luxury for its own sake. This is about alignment with the truth that supply is infinite, and that you are not separate from it. You are not banned from the universe. You are the universe, expressing through a point of consciousness. That is why your imagination is so powerful. It is the tool by which you navigate between states and ultimately claim the one you choose to embody. The world you experience is a mirror, nothing more. It reflects your dominant state, not your occasional thoughts. You may affirm wealth 100 times, but if your dominant assumption is lack, that will be your reflection. You must live from the place where financial freedom is not a hope, but a baseline. Begin with small things, paying a bill with joy, choosing the more generous option, walking with the posture of one who no longer fears money. These gestures, though simple, carry immense power when done from the right state. And remember, this is not a matter of time, but of assumption. Many ask, how long will it take for the wealth to appear? But that question reveals the misunderstanding. Time is irrelevant to the one who has already received. When you dwell in a state of freedom, the timing of its appearance becomes unimportant. You are no longer waiting, you are living. And in that living, the appearance must come, for the world cannot help but obey the vision you hold as real. When you assume the state of wealth inwardly, the world becomes your canvas. And on that canvas, your inner vision paints in colors the outer world must reflect. This is how financial freedom is created, not earned, not chased, but assumed, expressed, and finally revealed. You do not possess it, you are it. The secret of every transformation lies not in outer force, but in inner feeling. What you feel to be true becomes the law of your world. There is no power outside the feeling which you consistently accept within. To bring fortune into your life, you must dwell in the feeling of already being fortunate. This is not about affirming words mechanically, nor about daydreaming without faith. It is about entering a state of consciousness so vividly that you feel the weight of wealth upon your being. Feeling is the bridge between the seen and the unseen. It is not just an emotional echo, it is creative. Every structure you call reality began as a feeling, nurtured within the invisible. And if it was nurtured long enough, and with enough sincerity, it had no choice but to become form. You are always feeling something, yet few realize that what they feel is what they become. If you feel worried, you inhabit the world of problems. If you feel thankful, you dwell in abundance. If you feel fortunate, the world will shape itself to reflect that internal wealth. Most people make the mistake of waiting to feel rich. They wait until the evidence gives them permission to feel secure. But this is to misunderstand the order of creation. You do not feel rich because you have money. You have money because you feel rich. The one who waits is forever a servant of condition, but the one who assumes the feeling of wealth, without a single external sign, becomes the cause of new condition, which is the one who shapes destiny from within. You may ask, how do I feel it if I don't yet believe it? The answer is simple, through repetition, stillness, and sincerity. You begin by imagining what it would feel like if your greatest financial wish were fulfilled. You enter a quiet moment, and without effort or strain, you imagine the scene that implies it is done. Perhaps you are writing a check with ease or walking through your favorite store, buying anything you desire. You feel the ease, the lightness, the confidence, not as a hope, but as a memory. This is where the mind will often resist. It will say, this is foolish, this isn't real. But remember, reality does not arise from logic. It arises from belief. And belief is born from sustained feeling. If you persist in feeling wealthy, if you return to it again and again, the world must reorganize to accommodate the new truth you have claimed. The outer cannot disobey the inner. I recall once imagining the feeling of receiving a large sum of money. I had no reason to believe it would come, but each night I closed my eyes and rehearsed the moment I opened the envelope, saw the number, and felt a surge of gratitude and peace. It was not a performance. I allowed the scene to become real. I saw the texture of the paper, the weight of the envelope, the smile that came across my face. It felt true. And so it became true. Weeks later, without asking, without planning, the exact amount I had imagined arrived in the most natural way. But by then, I was not surprised, for I had already received it inwardly. This is the essence of the feeling that brings fortune. It is not frantic, it is not desperate, it is calm, it is relaxed, it is natural, and above all, it is consistent. You must feel as though your wish has already been fulfilled, and do so often enough that it becomes the only reality you respond to. You do not argue with appearances, you do not negotiate with doubt. You rest in the awareness that the seed has already been planted, and nothing can stop it from blooming. Feelings do not lie. When you dwell in the feeling of lack, you will encounter it at every corner. But when you dwell in the feeling of abundance, the world becomes a mirror of plenty. This law is impersonal. It does not judge or delay. It simply reflects. You may not know how it will unfold, nor must you. Your task is not to manage the mechanics. Your task is to hold the feeling and to act from it as naturally as possible. When you feel fortunate, you stop grasping. You stop begging. You begin to give, to trust, to breathe fully. And it is in this relaxed assurance that true wealth begins to manifest. The mistake is often in trying to make something happen when the only true cause is feeling. To imagine a fortune and then walk through your day feeling desperate is to cancel the creation. But to imagine a fortune and walk with ease, joy, and quiet confidence is to water the seed with life. You must be consistent in your inner tone. Do not feel rich for 5 minutes, then return to worry for the rest of the day. Choose the feeling of abundance like you would choose a garment, and wear it until it becomes your second skin. Every great change in your life will be preceded by a change in your feeling. There is no other way. The future you seek exists now, but you must meet it inwardly first. Enter the state where it is already done. Feel the relief, the gratitude, the joy as though it has happened. If you do this sincerely, the outer world will rearrange itself in perfect sequence, not by your effort, but by your faith. Feeling is the secret passage, the golden key, the language of creation. And when you feel fortune into being, the world will answer with substance. There comes a moment in the life of one who practices inner vision when money ceases to be a problem. Not because of a sudden windfall, but because of a quiet, radical shift in consciousness. The outer issue dissolves the moment the inner man stops fearing it. Money, like all material symbols, is never the cause. It is always the effect. To worry about it is to bow to the shadow, forgetting that the light that casts it begins within. The one who learns to think from sufficiency rather than about sufficiency has already crossed the invisible line between struggle and supply. When you no longer see money as a master to be appeased, but as a servant responding to your state, the anxiety begins to lose its hold. You walk differently. You breathe deeper. Your actions are no longer frantic. They are ordered, intentional, and governed by inner peace. You cease chasing outcomes and instead align with your true source, which is not your employer, your clients, or your business. Your true source is the invisible stream that flows from within. You call it imagination, intuition, knowing. It does not dry up. It does not fear recession. It is as stable as your willingness to trust it. To live from the awareness that money is no longer a problem is not to become reckless, but to become free. You move from a consciousness of pressure into a consciousness of power. You no longer calculate your self-worth by the digits in your account, nor your security by the next paycheck. You cease identifying as someone who needs and begin identifying as someone who has. And that inner identification is the axis upon which your entire outer world begins to turn. This shift cannot be faked. It must be embodied. You must reach the point where you feel that financial problems are irrelevant to your true identity. You're not the one who is anxious about money. You are the one who expresses abundance as a natural law. You are not defined by temporary delays, by pending payments, by late fees. Those are echoes of a former belief. You are now the one who has seen beyond the veil and recognized that money is only a visible symbol of an invisible supply. I remember once waking up in a place where the rent was due and the amount in my hand was not enough to meet it. But instead of panicking, I turned inward. I asked myself, what would I do today if this problem had already been solved? And I lived the answer. I walked in peace. I met the day with joy. I imagined the receipt of payment already made. I blessed my landlord with ease. I refused to engage with fear. And within 48 hours, without planning or manipulation, the money came in an unexpected way through an unexpected person, but it arrived on time and in the exact amount. And I understood the solution had never been external. The moment I ceased seeing money as a problem, the problem lost its reason to exist. This is the teaching. You cannot solve a financial issue while emotionally living in the state of insufficiency. The solution to money's apparent absence is not more effort, but a change in state. When you rise into the feeling of being supplied without knowing exactly how, you permit life to operate from its higher laws. The world rearranges itself to reflect the one who no longer places money on a pedestal of worry. The one who feels inwardly rich, even in modest conditions, becomes rich in the outer sense. Not by luck, but by law. Money must become to you what breath is to the lungs. Natural, unconscious, expected. You do not wake each morning wondering if the air will run out. You breathe because you trust. The one who has trained their mind in wealth thinks of money in the same way. It will come. It always does. Why? Because the supply is internal. Because the consciousness that governs your world has made peace with prosperity. The habit of panic has been replaced with the practice of stillness. If you act as though money is your constant adversary, it will remain elusive. But when you live as though it is a neutral tool, a fluid and natural extension of your chosen state, it flows. To make money into an idol is to forfeit your dominion, but to see it as a mirror of your self-concept is to reclaim power. The more you affirm your own sufficiency, the less need you feel to chase external reassurance. Ask yourself this: if all your financial needs were permanently met, how would you move through this day? How would you speak? How would you treat others? What choices would you make if pressure were replaced by freedom? Begin living those answers. Let your speech be calm. Let your gestures be generous. Let your thoughts be free from financial conflict. And from that inner rhythm, life will match your tone. Money is never the issue. The issue is always state. Choose the state where you are no longer the beggar, no longer the warrior, no longer the one who waits. Become the one who gives, the one who rests, the one who knows. That one does not fear money because that one has mastered the secret. Money is only a shadow, and it obeys the light that you are. The cause of all manifestation lies in belief, not belief in the sense of religious adherence or intellectual agreement, but belief as a living, breathing assumption that what is felt within is more real than what is observed without. To manifest millions is not to chase paper or numbers. It is to embody a belief so complete, so saturated with conviction, that doubt has no place to breathe. When one believes that wealth is natural, deserved, and already theirs in consciousness, the world begins to echo that certainty with form and flow. Your present circumstances do not reflect truth. They reflect belief. What you assume to be true about yourself, you will live. There is no other law. If you believe that you must struggle for every dollar, life will comply. If you believe that wealth is only for the select few, then you will stand outside its gates. But the moment you believe you are worthy of financial freedom, not in words, but in deep inner knowing, the gates swing open. Belief is not a performance, it is a position. You take your place in consciousness before you are recognized outwardly. The world does not grant permission to the believer, it bows to him. When you believe you are already in possession of what you desire, your world cannot help but reflect it, not because you begged, but because you became. There was once a man who struggled with financial lack for years. He would affirm abundance, yet feel poor. He would speak of success, yet identify with failure. Every affirmation was swallowed by a belief that nothing ever worked for him. He would visualize checks, but anticipate debts. He could not figure out why manifestation eluded him. And then one evening in stillness, he asked himself, not what he wanted, but what he truly believed. And the answer rose from deep within. I believe I must suffer to deserve. That was the root. And once he saw it, he began to plant something new. He began to tell himself, I believe in ease. I believe in flow. I believe that wealth is my natural state. At first it felt unfamiliar, but he persisted, not with effort, but with acceptance. He stopped praying for money and started believing in his inner wealth. And as he shifted his core assumption, things began to change. Opportunities appeared. His business expanded. Strangers brought him new possibilities. But more importantly, the burden lifted. He no longer needed to prove or struggle. He had believed himself into a new life. This is the invisible work that most overlook. They focus on action, strategy, and repetition. But action without belief is empty motion. Belief infuses the invisible with substance. When you believe, you no longer look for signs. You become the sign. You carry within you the quiet certainty that what you have accepted internally must externalize itself. The world has no choice in the matter. It must reflect what you believe about yourself. To believe in millions is to believe that money is not outside of you, it is through you. You are not the one chasing, you are the one expressing. You are the point of distribution through which abundance flows. But you must believe that you are such a vessel. If you believe that wealth is a game of odds or a reward for specialness, then it will appear random and distant. But if you believe that your mind is the projector and the world your screen, then you will treat belief as sacred architecture, crafting from within the empire you wish to walk through without. Do not wait for the world to give you evidence. The world is only a mirror. It cannot initiate anything. All it can do is reflect. You are the initiator. You are the first cause. What you believe now becomes what you see later. And it is always now. The question is never, will it happen? The question is, do I believe it already has? The moment you move into the state of already being the millionaire, the process begins. It does not begin when the money arrives. The money arrives because it has already begun. And yes, belief must be nurtured. It is not enough to say the words. You must feel the shift. You must see yourself differently. Walk into the shop and feel yourself able to buy what you desire, not out of ego, but out of alignment. Sit at your table and eat as one who has no worry about bills. Speak to your friends as one who knows all is well. It is not about flaunting, it is about embodying. You cannot deceive the law. You cannot think one way and live another. You must become the belief. There are those who will argue that facts must be faced, that bank accounts do not lie, that success is measured by visible achievement. But they do not know the law. They do not understand that the facts they see were first imagined, they were first believed, and if they were believed into being, they can be believed out of being. Everything is changeable except the law itself. So I say, believe wisely, believe boldly, believe as if your entire world depended on it, because it does. When you believe in millions, you do not wait to receive them before you change first. You rise in consciousness, you expect, not with desperation, but with peace. You allow the vision to take root. And as you do, the outer world slowly and then suddenly reveals what has been planted within. The law does not respond to what you do occasionally. It responds to what you dwell in consistently. The secret to manifesting any desire, especially the state of wealth, is not in grand emotional bursts or fleeting visions, but in quiet, persistent occupancy of the desired state. Consistency is the force that chisels imagination into form. It is not enough to imagine riches once or twice. One must return again and again to the inner scene of the wish fulfilled until it becomes more familiar than the world of appearances. To imagine wealth is simple. To remain faithful to that imagination in the face of contradiction is where mastery begins. Most abandon their inner vision too soon. They imagine for 5 minutes, then spend the remainder of the day worrying, doubting, and reacting to the senses. This is the undoing. For it is not the one who begins the race with enthusiasm who wins, but the one who endures in inner conviction until the outer reflects it. Your reality today is the harvest of what you have persistently believed in the past. If you have consistently assumed struggle, then struggle will blossom. If you have consistently imagined ease and wealth, even in small things, then wealth must come forth. You may not recall every thought, but the dominant emotional tone, the atmosphere in which your mind has dwelt, has shaped what you now call your life. To persist in the imagined state of wealth is to make that vision the dwelling place of your consciousness. It is to wake and feel rich before anything changes. It is to lie down in gratitude, knowing you are already supplied. It is to carry in the silence of your heart the inner knowing that you are walking through a world that is about to conform to your assumption. And though nothing has yet changed to the senses, something irreversible has occurred in the unseen. This kind of consistency does not require force. It requires devotion. It is the decision to return to your chosen vision. Every time fear or doubt attempts to pull you away, you catch yourself falling into old thinking and gently bring your mind back. You speak to yourself not with harshness, but with certainty. This is not my truth. My truth is abundance. My truth is ease. My truth is already done. I recall once teaching a man who imagined himself debt-free. He saw himself paying off his obligations, living with freedom, traveling, giving without hesitation. At first he felt exhilarated, but a few days later he received a new bill and panic rose again. He said, "I knew it wouldn't work." I replied, "No, it is already working. You simply have not persisted." The presence of the old echo does not mean the new assumption has failed. It means the old state is being dismantled. He returned to the vision. This time he made it his dwelling. Each night he would imagine checking his account and smiling. He would rehearse writing checks without hesitation, gifting freely, and feeling the lightness of solvency. Over time, this inner consistency bore fruit. Unexpected opportunities emerged, past debts were settled, and income grew. But more importantly, his nervous system relaxed. He was no longer imagining to escape fear, he was imagining as his natural state. This is the transformation that true persistence brings. It stabilizes your vibration. You no longer react to every bump in the road. You move with a calm authority, knowing that the world must eventually yield to what you have claimed within. You may still receive unexpected expenses or face temporary constraints, but they no longer shake you. Why? Because your home is no longer in lack. You visit it perhaps, but you do not live there. Consistency is not repetition for its own sake. It is repetition with absorption. To return to the same inner scene again and again until it becomes normal, this is how seeds take root. If you plant an idea today and dig it up tomorrow to check for progress, you have disrupted the process. But if you plant it and tend to it with quiet confidence, you will one day see green shoots bursting through the surface. Not because of your frantic energy, but because of your inner rest. When wealth is imagined consistently, it reshapes not only your thoughts, but your posture, your tone, your entire field of experience. You begin to speak differently, you spend differently, you attract differently. People sense your calm, your confidence, your direction. You no longer ask from a place of lack, but from a knowing that what you desire already belongs to you by right of consciousness. You must understand that every time you return to the state of the wish fulfilled, you are reinforcing your spiritual foundation. You are engraving upon the subconscious the image of your chosen reality. And once that image is impressed deeply enough, the world must mirror it. This is not fantasy. It is precision. The subconscious does not question, it obeys. But it must be given the same instruction often enough that it accepts it without resistance. You may imagine wealth one day and feel alive. Then the next day doubt whispers, but nothing has changed. This is the test. You must answer, it has changed within me, and return again to the scene, to the feeling, to the assumption. The outer change is inevitable, for no inner state remains unexpressed. That which is sustained in consciousness must find its reflection in time. So I tell you, choose your inner dwelling wisely. Remain there. Do not wander between wealth and worry. Do not trade your vision for what is popular or safe. Be consistent in your knowing, and the world will follow. There is no power greater than the one who lives from the end and does so every day, not just when it is easy, but when it is most needed. This is how imagined wealth becomes lived reality. There is no outer change without first an inner shift in identity. To manifest millions, one must become the one who possesses them, not in the outer world of action, but in the secret chamber of self-concept. It is never the thing that changes first. It is always the perceiver. When you move into a new identity silently, consistently, and wholeheartedly, the world must adjust to the new vibration you emit. Identity is the cause. Life, in all its forms, is the effect. You do not need to beg, chase, or struggle to change your life. You need only to become the one who already lives the life you desire. This is not pretending. Pretending holds a subtle awareness that what is being acted out is not yet real. Becoming, however, is different. When you become something in your mind and spirit, there is no tension. You no longer seek permission. You embody truth. And that truth bends the mirror of reality in your favor. To make this shift, one must cease identifying as the struggler, the doubter, the one waiting for change. You must stop being the one who watches and start being the one who knows. The world is full of people asking, when will it happen? But the one who has shifted silently in identity no longer asks that question. He knows it is already done. The time of fulfillment is now. The outer may take a moment to catch up, but the real transformation has occurred. The identity you carry is not fixed. It is chosen, and it is your repeated loyalty to it that solidifies it. At first, it may feel foreign to think of yourself as financially free, deeply supported, and permanently prosperous. But the more you assume that this is who you are, not who you wish to become, but who you already are, the more the old self loses its grip. You are not being arrogant when you assume a greater self. You are being obedient to the law of creation, which always begins with assumption. There is a quiet confidence that grows in those who have made this inner shift. They walk with presence. They no longer need to prove their worth. They are not chasing validation from the world because their world already reflects their internal wholeness. The change is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply appears as a new way of being. And from that being, new experiences are born. This is the reason that transformation often goes unnoticed by the outside world, until the evidence becomes too large to ignore. People will say you've changed, and they are right, but they did not see when it happened. For identity changes do not occur in boardrooms or bank statements. They occur in moments of stillness, when one decides that the former self no longer serves. And from that silent decision, everything else begins. There was once a woman who lived paycheck to paycheck. She had accepted it as normal. She never questioned it, for it was all she had known. But one evening in reflection, she asked herself, what if this is not who I am? The question disturbed her, but also awakened something within. She began to imagine herself as a woman of wealth, not just with money, but with freedom, choice, and ease. She imagined walking into any store, paying bills with a smile, traveling without checking balances. She did not try to change her outer conditions right away. She changed herself. At first, there was no sign of improvement, but she kept returning to her new identity, like returning home. She caught herself when old thoughts of limitation returned. She forgave them, but did not dwell in them. She blessed her present reality while holding her new self in consciousness, and slowly, change began. Her work received unexpected recognition. Her income doubled, then tripled. But more importantly, she no longer felt like the same woman. Her thoughts, her reactions, her posture had all transformed. She was no longer hoping for wealth. She was wealth in motion. This is the essence of the silent shift in identity. It is not forced, nor is it dependent on circumstances. It is a decision made in the invisible realm, and when held faithfully, it becomes flesh. The world responds to the one who has already claimed the end result, not the one who is still negotiating with possibilities. When you become the person who already has, you cease to be the person who is waiting. And in that subtle but profound change, the law moves. One does not need to announce this shift to others. In fact, it is often best kept sacred. The most powerful transformations are internal. They are known only by the one who has made them, but their fruits cannot be hidden for long. They appear in conversations, in choices, in the invitations life brings. When you change your concept of self, life reorganizes itself to match your new center. Do not concern yourself with how long the outer will take to change. Time is a tool, not a barrier. The outer world is the photograph. The inner identity is the negative. You do not change the image by scratching the photograph. You go back to the original and alter it at its source. So too must you go to the source, your self-concept, and revise it. There is no effort greater than this, but also none more rewarding. For when you shift silently, you rise above limitation. You step into dominion. You become the cause, and the world follows your lead. This is the mystery hidden in plain sight. That identity, quietly assumed, governs all expression. When you live from this truth, you no longer chase life, you magnetize it. The moment you assume the state of being wealthy, the unseen bridge to its fulfillment is set into motion. You may not recognize it at first. It does not often come with flashing lights or a loud trumpet announcing its arrival. But quietly, faithfully, the bridge of incidents begins to unfold. The people you meet, the conversations you overhear, the delays you endure, and even the disappointments you face. These are all stepping stones upon that invisible path. They are not obstacles, they are invitations, pulling you across time into the physical experience of the thing already accepted in imagination. Most do not understand this bridge because they expect it to look a certain way. They imagine a linear path, a clear roadmap from here to there. But the bridge never moves in straight lines. It weaves, it curves, it twists through unexpected terrain, and it must be walked in trust. The moment you imagine your desire fulfilled, a sequence is ignited in a realm beyond the senses. You are not required to know the how. You are only required to remain loyal to the state. The bridge builds itself. You walk it by feeling the end, even while the middle remains unclear. There was a time I imagined a great financial breakthrough. I saw myself receiving a large sum of money, not vaguely, but with clarity. I felt the relief, the calm, the confidence it brought. I saw myself in possession of the funds, not counting every coin, but blessing every expense. I imagined this repeatedly and then released the need to control. In the weeks that followed, nothing dramatic occurred at first, but then a meeting happened that seemed unrelated, a delay that caused me to take a different route, a conversation that led to a name I had never heard before. One thing after another, all ordinary in appearance, and yet they linked together like golden threads. And then came the result, not magically, but naturally, through a path that no intellect could have predicted. This is the wonder of the bridge. It does not operate by logic, it operates by law. When you live in the end, you call into action forces that are outside the scope of common understanding. The subconscious takes your assumption and begins to mold the events of the world to meet it. People call it coincidence, serendipity, even luck. But it is none of those things. It is simply the echo of a state fully accepted, and the bridge is always perfect. Even the parts you do not like, even the delays, the rejections, the seemingly negative outcomes, these too are the bridge. They are not there to punish you, but to redirect and refine the path. If you judge too soon, you may abandon the journey altogether. But if you trust, if you remain faithful to the vision, you will one day look back and say, it all had to happen exactly as it did. That is why it is essential to live in the end, not merely visit it. A temporary visit may generate emotion, but it cannot sustain manifestation. You must make the vision your dwelling. Speak from it, think from it, feel from it. When challenges come, respond as the one who already has what they desire. Let every moment be colored by that assumption. If you feel doubt creeping in, gently return to the state. If you are tempted to react to current appearances, remind yourself, these are not the truth. The truth is already established within. And here is the most beautiful part. When the bridge begins to unfold, you will not feel strained. The doors will open naturally. The connections will seem effortless, and you will move as if carried. This is not the result of trying harder, but of assuming deeper. You do not create the bridge, you discover it. You realize it was always there, waiting for you to align with the end. When you imagine vividly and consistently, you send out a spiritual signal, one that reshapes reality without your conscious interference. You must not try to outthink the law. You must only walk faithfully in the mood of the fulfilled desire. The rest takes care of itself. The person, the opportunity, the idea, all these elements gather themselves and present when the time is right. You may not be able to trace the line between imagination and manifestation while you're in the middle of it. But afterward, when you look back, you will see it clearly. The delay that frustrated you was the necessary pause before alignment. The loss that shook you was the very clearing that made room for the gain. The stranger who appeared out of nowhere was the answer to a prayer spoken only in silence. This is the great mystery revealed, that the moment you feel something as real, reality begins its journey toward you. And that journey, though invisible, is unfailing. The only condition is your persistence, not in effort, but in state. The bridge appears not to the one who wishes, but to the one who walks as if it is already done. You are not waiting for life to catch up. You are walking the path that was laid out the moment you accepted your desire as true. Let every step, every breath, every conversation be informed by the version of you that already lives in wealth. The bridge is always beneath your feet. It only becomes visible to the one who no longer seeks signs, but becomes the sign. The moment you accept something as real in imagination, you have already initiated its journey into form. And from that moment on, a path begins to emerge. Not a path you can see with physical eyes, not one your logic could design, but a perfect invisible bridge of events that will carry you across the gulf between the imagined and the experienced. The bridge of incidents, though unseen by most, is the most faithful and elegant function of the law. It does not delay, it does not forget, it does not fail, but it does require one thing: your loyalty to the end. When you live in the end, you are not merely visualizing a goal, you are claiming an identity, you are assuming that what is longed for is already yours, and in that moment of assumption, you set in motion a sequence of events that the rational mind cannot trace. You may wake tomorrow and see nothing different. The bank account might still speak of lack, the job may still seem rigid, but deep underneath the surface of the visible world, the wheels have begun to turn. The bridge does not care if you understand how, it only asks that you remain faithful to the scene played out in imagination. This is where most lose their way, not because the law failed, but because they looked for evidence too early. They questioned the silence, they doubted the delay, and in doing so they returned to the old state, the very state that produced the lack they hoped to escape. But to the one who persists, the bridge becomes a miracle in motion. Conversations arise that lead to new ideas. Obstacles move without confrontation. People show up not knowing they are answering a request spoken in silence. And what once felt far away begins to press against the walls of your reality as if it had always been there, waiting to be seen. Understand that every state you occupy must externalize itself. If you occupy the state of being wealthy, then you have already been given the keys to walk the path that wealth must take to reach you. but it will not come as a dramatic leap. It will unfold through life itself. The cup of coffee shared with a stranger, the letter that arrives by mistake, the missed train that leads to a conversation that alters your career. None of these are accidents. They are the stones of the bridge. And the only requirement to walk it is to remain in the state of the wish fulfilled. You will be tempted to interfere, to force the outcome, to rush the timeline. But this only scatters the energy and delays the unfolding. Instead, you must remain still within. Still but faithful. The bridge will carry you. Let it. Your role is not to design the journey. Your role is to dwell in the destination. That is the power of vision. To stand mentally at the end and look back at what the world calls the beginning, knowing it is already complete. The bridge may carry you through terrain you do not yet understand. You may lose something along the way. A relationship may end. A job may vanish. An offer may be declined. And yet, if you trust the vision, you will come to see that every seeming detour was a straight path in disguise. Nothing is wasted. No step is meaningless. Each one is aligned with the end you have claimed in spirit. There is a sacred rhythm to the bridge. It may be slow or swift. It may be quiet or loud, but it is always exact. Every person who appears, every delay that frustrates, every nudge that redirects, all of these are coordinated responses to your inner assumption. The law is not emotional, but it is infinitely intelligent. It knows the most direct, harmonious, and convincing way to bring your desire into form, provided you do not sabotage it by returning to the state of not having. Do not seek to predict the bridge. That is not your work. Do not ask when or how. These questions belong to a state of doubt. Your only task is to occupy the feeling of already having received, to sit at the dinner table as if the inheritance has cleared, to walk into the store as if your name carries the weight of provision, to go to sleep, not asking for a miracle, but thanking life for the miracle already done. That is how the bridge strengthens beneath your feet. And one day you will look back, not with pride, but with awe, and realize that everything was perfectly timed, that even your hesitation was used for good, that even your doubts were woven into the dance, and you will no longer fear the gap between desire and fulfillment, because you will have walked across it, not through force, but through faith, not through effort, but through surrender to the end you imagine. The bridge is real. It is not visible until you walk it, but once you do, you understand. Nothing was ever random. The universe is not chaotic. It is ordered, intelligent, and responsive to assumption. From the first moment you believe a thing is already yours, life begins constructing a story around that belief. And the story, no matter how strange, will always lead you home. Now you know. It was never about chasing the millions. It was about becoming the self who never questioned the worthiness of them. The wealth you seek does not lie in the world. It lies in the state from which you view the world. You are not a beggar pleading with life for favor. You are a creator, shaping reality from within the silence of your imagination. And the moment you claim wealth as yours, not by reaching for it, but by living from it, you begin to witness the law in motion. Everything begins and ends with your state. The law does not fail, but it reflects only what you have dared to embody. Your assumptions, consistently held, become bridges. Your identity, silently shifted, governs every experience. There are no exceptions. The world moves at the command of your inner world. And once you live as if the millions are already yours, the bridge to their appearance begins its quiet, perfect construction. You will not always see how it will unfold, but you will know deeply that it must. Because you have felt it real, because you have persisted, because you have finally understood that the end is not a destination, it is a dwelling place. You do not visit the feeling of abundance, you abide in it. You live in it, and by living in it, you bring it into visibility. Walk forward now, not as one who hopes, but as one who remembers. You are not becoming rich. You are remembering that you always were. The millions are not a reward. They are a reflection of who you have chosen to be. And once you live like you've already won them, the world cannot help but deliver the echo of your assumption. That is the law, that is the truth, and that is the power already within you.